unemployment. Note that I have skipped chapter 13 and 14 for a moment because unemployment is another measure of statistics for the economy, while chapter 13 and 14 are primarily on the financial markets in America. Okay, so far I've talked about a bunch of numbers, right? GDP, GDP deflator, and other GDP related measures. They are used to measure, remember intuitively, how rich, how poor a country, state, or city is. Then I talked about the so-called consumer price index. So first, we want to measure whether or not a country, city, or state is rich or poor. Second, so for example, if you make $1,000 a month, right? So that's your personal GDP if you are your own country. Okay, so next, we are interested in knowing how many stuff you can get from your $1,000 income or salary. Remember, to maintain a so-called decent quality of life or living standard, it costs you different amount of money. It depends on where you live. So for example, if you want to live a decent life in America, and if you live in New York City, it may cost you, so for example, $3,000 a month. On the other hand, if you live in a cheaper city, so for example, San Antonio, for the same living standard, it may only cost you, so for example, $16,000. So the cost of living is lower in San Antonio than in cities like New York City. Okay, and we use a statistic called the Consumer Price Index, CPI, to measure the cost of living, right? A higher CPI number implies a higher living cost. And over time, if the CPI number is getting higher and higher for a city, that means it costs you more money to live in that particular city. Okay, so another statistic which is very important measuring a nation's economy is so-called unemployment rate. So in addition to how much money do you make, GDP, how much money do you need to spend every month, right, to maintain a decent quality of life or living standard? That's called Consumer Price Index. Next, it comes to how can you make $1,000 per month, for example, right? If you don't have a job, you don't have income, you are unemployed, but are you part of the unemployment rate reported by the US federal government every month? So this is our next topic on unemployment. So I'm going to continue using this website, US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Remember, I use this website also for CPI. You can see here the Consumer Price Index. And the next statistic is called unemployment rate. So my first question, are you being considered unemployed by the US federal government? The answer actually is pretty complicated. So for example, from my set of slides, if I go to here. So every month, the US federal government, specifically the Bureau of Labor Statistics, working together with so-called Census Bureau, another US government agency, they survey many households and they want to figure out or they want to estimate how many people are unemployed in the economy every month. So in this survey, they ask people a bunch of questions. They want to, based on people's answer to questions in the survey, they want to place people in two groups, whether or not you are in the labor force or not. So to be in the labor force, you have to pass a sequence of criteria. So you will be ruled out of the labor force if, so for example, if you're a child, that means you're younger than 16 years old. So to be considered in the labor force, you must be an adult, 16 years and older. And also you must be a civilian. That means if you are not serving in the military, right, you are not in the labor force. If you are not in the labor force, you are neither employed nor unemployed. Next, you are not institutionalized. That means you are not in prison. you have been actively looking for jobs. So if you are in the labor force, that means you won't get a job and you are actively looking for a job. To be in the labor force, you should not be a full-time student. So for example, if you are a full-time student, college student, graduate school, law school, med school right now, right? So you are not in the labor force. So if you are a full-time college student, you are neither employed nor unemployed by the US standards. Also, to be in the labor force, you should not be a homemaker. That means stay at the home mom and dad. And of course, you are not a retiree to be considered in the labor force. Okay, so based on people's response, the Bureau of Labor Statistics put people into 3 categories. If you are in the labor force, you are either employed or unemployed. However, if you are a child, you are serving the military, you are institutionalized, you are not looking for a job, you are a full-time college student, you are a homemaker, or you are a retiree, in this case, you will be put into this category, not in the labor force. So that means here, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. To be considered as unemployed or to be considered in the unemployment rate reported by the US federal government, you must be either employed or unemployed, or that means you must be in the labor force.